I used to think Tucker Carlson was a conservative, certainly articulate and sharp and brave sometimes when he was getting it said on Fox News, becoming its top star as well, quite deserved. But something in him has now switched, broken really. And we sure saw that last week when Tucker Carlson interviewed former Vice President Mike Pence at the Family Leadership Summit in Iowa. I've got to say, interview is the wrong word. It's more like the Carlson show, riffing off Mike Pence, treating him like a straight man. And I tell you, Pence is going to have to get a whole lot tougher if he really does want to become president. So, what has changed with Carlson? And particularly since Fox News sacked him for getting a little bit ahead of himself, a bit too arrogant, shall we say, a law until his own, and a little bit loopy in an ugly way. Well, what's changed is this. He's become as conservative as a bomb thrower. He's now trawling in sewers for conspiracy theories, the kind of thing that gets him a lot of internet clicks. And is even stooping to interview pornographer Andrew Tate in the most soft-focused way. Yeah, that's Mr. Family Leadership for you, Mr. Conservative. But, well, there you go, as long as he gets attention and those internet clicks, those little clicks on Twitter that are just so important. Now, before I get onto his performance last week, I've got to say, the last time I criticised Tucker Carlson, I got thousands, many thousands of messages of abuse. Tucker is a great man. He got sacked for getting too close to the truth. Tucker for president. And I think that may have gone to his head. I think that's his little ambition at the moment. And as for me, well, according to his messages, thousands of them, I'm a sellout, I'm kissing my boss's backsides, call myself a conservative, all that sort of stuff. Oh, I've been paid apparently to sell the big lie, whatever the lie of the moment is that suits, the supposed secret cabal that's running the world, Klaus Schwab or whatever. Well, to be frank, I'll put my conservative credentials over Tucker Carlson's any day, earned over some decades. But the difference is this. Yes, he's more famous, but I at least say what I think, whatever the abuse, while Carlson, as we know, will yuck it up with Donald Trump, for instance. Oh, let me laugh at your jokes, Mr. President. While in private, as we now know from court documents, he says he privately hates the man and complains that Trump delivered not much in 4 years. That's not my opinion, but it is privately Tucker Carlson's. But I mentioned accusations of telling lies. And that brings me back to Carlson and the Mike Pence stoush last week. And it brings me back to one more reason I'm afraid to say I have contempt for Tucker Carlson. It's his dishonesty. It's either his dishonesty or his stupidity. You take your pick. Like his claim last week that the Ukrainian president is locking up Christians for their beliefs. The Ukrainian president, a Jew by the way, that'll become significant, is locking up Christians for their beliefs. I could not believe what I was hearing. Background, of course, that Tucker Carlson claims that America should give $1 more of military aid to Ukraine to help its army fight back against the Russians who invaded their country, first taking Crimea and parts of the east 9 years ago, and then trying to take the rest of Ukraine in a massive attack a year and a half ago. Well, that hasn't gone well. Now, of course, Carlson's entitled to argue this is not America's fight. Not one more dollar to this and, fears of nuclear war, all that. Honest people can believe that stuff, even though I believe it's a stupid argument. It's a dangerous argument. And I think it's actually an argument that Tucker's too smart to really believe. After all, think about it for a second. If Russia wins this war, backed by its ally, Communist China, then China will know that America is weak, America won't defend its allies, and China will know that it can itself now invade Taiwan and replace the United States as the world's great superpower. Now, this is not some conspiracy theory. It is, well, the Chinese dictator himself told Russian President Vladimir Putin of exactly that kind of big dream in their meeting in March.
Это как раз сейчас перемены, которые не было в течение 100 лет. Там, где вместе двигаем эти перемены. Перекиньте, пожалуйста.
And that change that's coming, well, China's dictator, President Xi Jinping, has made that very clear over many years. It's a change where China rules, America declines, even falls. Now, if Tucker is okay with all that, then let him say why. Just let him say why. We can have an honest argument about that, but Carlson does not do that. And with Mike Pence last week, he tried instead this pathetic argument, for dropping Ukraine, essentially meaning that leaving Ukraine to be gobbled up by Russia. Let's be honest about that too. That's what it really means. Leave it defenseless against Russia. Well, with Mike Pence, he tried this argument that not only was Ukraine corrupt, but its president, Volodymyr Zelensky, was a tyrant who was jailing Christians for being Christians. And why was this Mike Pence okay with this outrage?
It's very clear that the Zelensky government has arrested priests for having views they disagree with. That's not consistent with religious liberty. It's an attack on it, and we're funding it. And I'm just wondering how is it, and I don't mean to be disrespectful at all, but I sincerely wonder how a Christian leader could support the arrests of Christians for having different views.
So Ukraine is just arresting Christians for having different views, religious views? And when Pence tried to point out this was in fact false, in fact he'd heard the opposite from a Ukrainian Christian leader himself when he went to Ukraine. Has Tucker been there? Well, then Tucker Carlson just went in harder.
The Zelensky government has raided convents, arrested priests. That's not consistent with religious liberty. It's an attack on it, and we're funding it. I would think you would have greater concern for religious liberty in Ukraine.
All right, let's go through Carlson's falsehoods here. For a start, America is not funding any attack in Ukraine on religious liberty, even if that is what is going on. And it's not. Because if President Zelensky really was, attacking Christians, boom, 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 oh, you're a Christian, Christian leaders in Ukraine would be protesting. The Pope would be protesting. Ukraine's Christian political parties, they would be protesting. But they are not, because Tucker Carlson is not telling the truth. Now, yes, a convent, actually a monastery, don't think of nuns here, think of monks, it was raided. And yes, its head was put under house arrest. And yes, police have investigated some other priests as well, and one was even jailed for 12 years. Now, why would that be exactly? For their religious beliefs? Is it about religious freedom, as Tucker Carlson would have you believe? Is it because, here were priests that believe that Christ has risen, when President Zelensky, well, he is actually Jewish. And I mentioned that because we know from an earlier Tucker Carlson spray that he really has something about that Jewish president, doesn't he? I mean, sweaty, Tucker calls him. Rat-like, a little bit of those, anti-Semitic tropes. Anti-Christian, of course, he reckons too.
Ukraine, as you may have heard, is led by a man called Zelensky. Sweaty and rat-like, a comedian turned oligarch, a persecutor of Christians.
So is that it? He is Zelensky the Jew, a persecutor of Christians. Well, the answer is actually quite simple, very simple. The priests being arrested are not being arrested at all for their religious beliefs, but for spying for Russia, for aiding its army, like that jailed priest, for instance, or for pushing Russian propaganda when there is Ukraine fighting for its very existence, for its life. People are dying there. And then what do you expect? Now, the priests we're talking about are actually from the Russia-tied Ukrainian Orthodox Church. There's another Orthodox church that's pro-Ukrainian, not involved, not complaining at all about what's going on here. And this Ukrainian Orthodox Church is tied to the Russian Orthodox Church, the one led by Patriarch Kirill, who is not a humble priest, a man of just religious opinions, but a former KGB spy who is so corrupt that he used to brazenly wear a $23,000 watch until it became a media scandal. And Kirill, need I say, is very close to the president, himself a former spy, and has been all in with Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine, to the extent of telling Russians who go fight the Ukrainians and die there will have all their sins washed away. And has warned the West of an Armageddon if they try to defeat Russia.
И вот это желание победить Россию сегодня приобрело, как мы знаем, очень опасные формы. Мы молимся Господу, чтобы Он вразумил тех безумцев и помог им понять, что всякое желание уничтожить Россию будет означать конец мира.
So, of course, Ukraine is worried if priests of that kind of caliber, who are more interested in destroying Ukraine than preaching the gospel, of course is worried and wants them investigated, and a couple that actively aid Russia, or one that aids Russia, actually jailed, okay? And if Western church leaders have any concern about what's going on over there in this area, I tell you, it hasn't been about any supposed anti-Christian attacks by Ukraine's president. It's actually been against Putin's pal, Patriarch Kirill, backing the slaughter of Ukrainians. Pope Francis has warned him, don't be Putin's altar boy. So that's what Ukraine's President Zelensky is facing. A Putin puppet, a former spy, leading a church and calling for Ukraine's destruction. He's a church leader with agents and sympathizers inside Ukraine itself, helping the Russian war effort. And for Carlson to portray those Putin priests as somehow victims of religious persecution, just, you know, there they were reading their Bible, is a disgrace. It's a con, and I'd have to say it's a lie. And it's a spear that can only help Putin in his brutal war of aggression. And then I have to point out, Tucker Carlson, are you a hypocrite? Because if you're really so concerned about persecuted Christian priests in that part of the globe, how about the 2 Greek Orthodox priests who've been arrested and reportedly tortured in eastern Ukraine? And no, not by the Ukrainians, not by, Zelensky's goons, but by the Russian invaders, by Putin's people. So where is Tucker Carlson protesting about that? Or the Russian priest who was arrested for telling Russian soldiers invading Ukraine they were going to hell? No. Attacks Ukraine falsely for persecuting Christians, but Tucker Carlson is absolutely silent when it's Russia doing just that. I ask you, is that honest? Is that honest? How Tucker Carlson again presented what was going on in Ukraine last week? And why exactly, do we ask? And this is where Mike Pence might have got a bit tougher. Why exactly is Tucker Carlson so soft on this fascist Putin and so hard on the Jewish Zelensky? I tell you, something has broken with Tucker Carlson, that conservative, Mr. Family Leadership.